every Indian village has got 5G. So, and I can go on, like we built the same thing in terms of infrastructure, the roads that you see in Mumbai. For a long time, we said that we will connect Mumbai to uh, the mainland, and we now have the bridge that is running. So we've executed. We've also had policy which is sustainable. So even when you see between governments, right, we all thought that Aadhaar was uh, the earlier government's piece. I think this government was wise enough to saying we've had continuity in policy at all times in terms of that. We've had stability, we've had predictability. We've also been conservative. So as Indian successive finance ministers, we've always maintained our debt in order. Relative to global debt, we are still 50% of GDP as debt. So we are not, like the world norm is now 100%. So we've had, and I think that we've also in the private sector, and what excites me the most is the startup industry. When I interact with startups and we see young 28, 30-year-olds starting up companies, and I can clearly see, right, 100 new Reliances in terms of where, and the aspiration, the confidence that they have. And finally, it is the confidence that you see. Fortunately, we now operate across the length and breadth of India. So it's not only the confidence in forums like this, but when you see the confidence in young people going to school and colleges, wanting, and in parents today believing that their tomorrow is better than today, right? And that is a big change in India, that all of us, this is our baby boomer generation. This is the Indian generation that believes that they'll make a better tomorrow than today. And that's the confidence that we see as a result of all of this. And I don't want to rule out, like when everybody, we've also had, right, at least I think a sustained 15, 20 years of great law and order, right? And that is a prerequisite to continuous economic growth, social harmony. All of these things matter in terms of that. And hopefully, like we are now setting the foundation for many decades, the world sees that. And that is why, even like after the budget, we had the European Treaty, we had, fortunately, the US. So the world is looking at us. We have, like, and we at Reliance get at least every month 3 or 4 global majors. We cannot say yes to everybody for partnerships in terms of saying we want to come to India and can we work together. So the world is taking notice of India. It's a tree laden with abundant fruit. And I've always believed that for profit and for prosperity, nobody needs an invitation. And that is why we are attracting all the people. And I think this is very sustainable over the coming decades, right?
Sustainable for the coming decades, and 100 more Reliances, in your words, from the startup ecosystem. If that is, comes true and that bears fruit, it'll be a very different economy, as you point out, Mr. Ambani. But, I want to understand from you, since we're talking about Jio BlackRock, we're talking about the opportunity for India's financial sector. A lot of people are asking, is the ambition and the aspiration to disrupt this business just as you did with telecom, Mr. Ambani?
Well, our ambition and aspiration starts with, what I admire about Larry. Right? And Larry is not only, right, the result-oriented CEO of a US top global multinational, right? But I think that he has a very compassionate and passionate heart, right? When he told me that, look, like at the end of the day, purpose of BlackRock is not to just make short-term results or not even to make returns, right, for my investors and my shareholders. Right? If I cannot put this money to work, first for the betterment of society, and as a byproduct, I give my investors and shareholders returns, then I would have done my job. And that is the Reliance philosophy too. We've always believed that uh, and our minds match. And the purpose of Jio BlackRock, right? And I think that disruption is fashionable, but the opportunity that we see is that Indians have really been savers, right? Right from, if you look at our history, we have saved consistently over the last 5, 6 decades. What has happened is that some of this saving has not been productive. If you see just the last year, right, we as India imported $60 billion worth of gold, and we imported 10 to 15 billion worth of silver. And all of this not for industrial use, but really for domestic savings in terms of. Now, this is unproductive. If we can actually convince the Indian saver that if one invests in the capital markets in a safe, transparent, and consistent way, there are returns. And these returns we heard from all the three panelists compound. And for us at Jio BlackRock, the opportunity is to encourage Indians to save, but to make sure that we give them the options to convert those savings into earnings and hopefully compound their earnings so that they not only work for themselves, but they also work for the Indian economy. And that propels the Indian economy to grow in terms of what we want to do. And then we all grow together. So, yes, if you call that disruption, we will use technology distribution to achieve that for every Indian household, for every Indian small business and large businesses. That's our objective.
So from the foundation and the beginnings of BlackRock, we never focused on targets of growth, ever. And yet, our focus has been relentlessly on the client, whether it's a client who's awarding us 100 rupees or a sovereign wealth fund who is awarding us tens of billions of dollars. If you are working on behalf of each and every client, and you're serving that client over a long horizon with good advice, with maybe a degree of safety, and importantly, just confidence building about the opportunities of compounding over a long period of time. Through the utilization of technology to intersect more often, more frequently, to have deeper, broader relationship with your clients. That's how disruption occurs. But disruption does not occur because you set a target. The target is making sure you're living with purpose every day with each and every client. And if you can achieve that with consistency day after day, clients will reward you with more share of their wallet. And so to me, it's just it's a process. It's a process you have to earn every day, live every day. And if you do that properly and you embedded that in the culture of the firm, we could be disruptive, but you can't be otherwise.
Yes, we can't be otherwise. You need to have the alignment of values, and then, of course, everything else builds on top of that. But Mr. Ambani, let me come back to you on the investing in India's growth opportunity and this new era that we're speaking about, and the role of making strategic choices today, which will require patient capital. And I want to understand from your perspective what it will take actually to build patiently with patient capital over the next 2 decades.
Well, I think that the Indian opportunity, as we stand at about $4.5 trillion of GDP in a $110 trillion world. Right? I see us outgrowing the world and finding our right place. So I am one of those believers who think that this 4.5 in a 20, 30-year period, right, will outgrow the rest of the world, and we will hit 25, $30 trillion. It's going to be 30 years from now, but as we do that, the India opportunity is a 10, 20, 30-year opportunity. And when you think about solving India's energy problems. I am a believer that in the next decade, India will not import 80% of its energy. We have a path, and God willing, like with technological breakthroughs, we will be reasonably self-sufficient in energy. Investments in such like energy sectors which make us self-sufficient are 20, 30-year time horizons. Investments in physical infrastructure that we still need. We have the opportunity to build with today's technology the physical infrastructure for 1.4 billion people. We've done a lot, but there's a lot more to do. These are also 20, 30-year opportunities. Technological infrastructure. We are not going to be behind the world in terms of building country scale intelligence infrastructure so that every village has intelligence available to them. And this also is a 20, 30-year opportunity. Each one of this is hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. And within that, while the benefits are there, right, they're long-term, sustainable, compoundable opportunities, and that requires sustainable capital, which comes both from within and outside. And to my mind, India is attracting, we ourselves, our own experience in most of our industries is that it is not capital which is a problem. It is opportunities and execution, right? And the ability to give an overall transparent framework to both the consumers and the investors, which is the opportunity. It's not going to be limited by patient capital. The world recognizes that India, because the world also doesn't have many such scale opportunities where they can deploy on a few projects hundreds of billions of dollars.
Absolutely. The market, of course, in India presents a very compelling opportunity across different sectors, as you spoke of. But Larry Fink, let's talk about AI and the power, the potential of AI. And you're a big believer in the AI story, not just for BlackRock, but in general. You know, the stock market volatility notwithstanding, the fact that we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars in this AI infrastructure build out, and this is sort of front-loaded spending, and there's a question mark still on the revenues and the returns. How do you sum up what is happening in the world of AI today? What do you look for? What do you look at?
I would first and state that I don't believe there's an AI bubble.
You don't believe that?
Not at all. I believe the greatest risk we have is if we don't invest and continue to invest, China will win. And I believe the need to rapidly expand the AI opportunities is necessary. That doesn't mean we're not going to have some bankruptcies. We'll have some failures. That's capitalism. You're going to have some big successes and big failures. But the opportunity that companies have in utilizing AI is going to be present in everything we do. I mean, even yesterday you had Anthropic announce a new model, which is going to be threatening for some businesses, but it's going to be an opportunity for other businesses. You mentioned Davos, and you mentioned the word cloud. There's no question AI is among the most topical conversations we're having now because it is disruptive. It's going to be disruptive for some industries, but it's going to also be very advancing. I mean, the future of AI in terms of drug discovery, in terms of humanity, is real. The use of AI for the development of new sources of power or cheaper sources of power, what can that mean in the long run for the global South? Could we have abundance in energy one day? Now that's still pretty far-fetched at this moment, but the opportunities of the acceleration of science is there. Rob Goldstein talked about, having the ability to use AI to learn everything about one subject in minutes now. And so AI is going to allow more discovery, more opportunities. And with that technology, like so many other technologies, it's going to be disruptive for some businesses and some economies. And the key for AI to be really successful in every society, we need to make sure that AI broadens economic success, and it doesn't narrow economic success. We talked about that a lot in Davos the last 2 weeks, and that's going to be the real issue. Can AI be not only disruptive, but can it be expanding and broadening economic success throughout all economies? And that's going to be the big question about, how do we play that out? In the early part of AI, you're going to see countries that are huge winners and some countries that are going to be left behind. And so you have all this dynamism around how AI is going to be playing out. That is in the short run. In the long run, I think it's going to be more democratizing. But in the first few parts of AI, it's going to be more limiting. And so we look at AI as a huge opportunity. For us in navigating the $14 trillion that we manage on behalf of our clients, we have to use advanced technologies to process the business that we are already doing. And the same thing for all the other major companies. Through AI, you have better understanding of your clients, better understanding of your inventory controls. You have so many advantages by the application of AI and technology. And that is, in the long run, to be very powerful. In so many of the developed economies, we have excessive deficits. It's a conversation that was not talked about in Davos about the excessive deficits, which is a substantial problem for many of the developed economies, including the United States. Can AI increase productivity? And if so, can we increase GDP with a diminishing population? That's going to be the question that Korea is going to be asking, and Japan's going to be asking, and Italy. Can you have a growing economy? Can you have a broadening of economic success with fewer people, with the utilization of AI and robotics? I believe the answer is going to be profoundly yes. But it also means countries that have very rapid growing populations, that's going to be a bigger question. And I think India is at the nexus of it, large base population, but the one thing that I've noticed, India is more accepting of technologies than many of the developed countries. India is more accepting of related to change than most developed economies. And so because of the large scale population, AI is going to create jobs and disrupt jobs. But for those economies that are willing to accept change and rapidly deploy that change in a positive way, and I think about India, the way it rapidly transformed its economy with the digitization of the rupee. I mean, to me, that was a wonder to watch. And so to me, AI is going to be a powerful growth engine in the world, but we need to make sure it's a growth engine for more.
You're absolutely right. And, to your point about India surprising on the digitization front, this was a surprising fact for me as well. The Binance CEO in Davos telling me that India is the #1 adopter of blockchain technology. And that's something that I was not aware of. But Mr. Ambani, since we're talking about AI and we're talking about technology, to Larry Fink's point, how do we leverage all of this to create shared wealth creation?
Well, I think that I'm a believer, have been a believer that we have to embrace technology. We cannot run away from it. And AI is real, right? From an India point of view, it is hugely advantageous. If we think about 200 million children in our schools, and if we now think about connectivity to all our schools, and we give ourselves a goal that in 1 decade, right, with a fraction of the total GDP that others spend on education, we can deliver to each of these 200 million kids, including in the remotest village, quality education, right? I think without AI, this problem, we could not have dreamt about solving it. And we will, we are also participating in this opportunity. This is a solvable problem. You take healthcare and saying India is a large economy, 1.4 billion people, but without any social security, without any organized health safety net, right? As yet, relative to all the other countries. can we deliver? Everybody, like the large economies, spend 8, 10, 12% of their GDP on delivering healthcare to their citizens. Large amount of it is wasted in terms of what, and everybody recognizes this. Can we in India take care of all our 1.4 billion people with a digital physical health system at a fraction of global costs? Answer is cannot do it without AI. Security, right? Again, critical for our safety for all our 1.4 billion people. If you use AI, right, and complement it with your law enforcement policies, possible to do. Simple taxation, right? We can now have the ability to have for each citizen, each company, the transactional transparency. So your tax paying becomes as simple as when you stay in a hotel and you have an electronic system, you can see all your transactions both ways and there are no disputes. And it becomes a much predictable, enforceable society. Can it? So that's AI. And we shouldn't get scared of AI. It's exactly like when the Industrial Revolution came, right? Humanity moved forward. We moved, productivity moved forward. We moved from 0.3% growth for many, many decades or many centuries to 3% growth overall, right? And at that time, if you go back 200 years and if you ask people that can people travel 2,000 kilometers a day, right? You would say not possible. Today, all of us, not two, with flying, we can travel 30,000 kilometers a day. And I think we're just at the beginning of that age. We must embrace it. India has the opportunity, and what we see, as you said, is we see that young Indians, as Kamath Saab said, old Indians, right? India just adapts to technology faster than everybody. We've seen it firsthand over the last 5 years in terms of what we want, and we should use that at our competitive advantage. Embrace this, get the productivity advantage, get the earnings advantage, build a better society in terms of, and use tomorrow's technology before anybody else so that we catch up from our $4,000 or few $1,000s per capita to double digit per capita, and then get to, the US is still at $40,000, $50,000 a capita. So we've got a long way to go. This is our part to catch up. And I think the world will allow us to catch up with them in the next 2 decades. And that's an opportunity, like from my point of view, at Reliance, we are taking this opportunity with both hands in terms of that. It's once in tens of centuries opportunity, and we can, like, if we embrace technology, if we allow our youth to embrace that, right, then in the next 20, 30 years, we can redefine India and find our true position in the world.
A multi-generational opportunity, as you put it, Mr. Ambani. But Mr. Fink, let me address the issue that you brought up and said it didn't get enough attention in Davos, and that was deficit. But what did get a lot of attention in Davos was, of course, the interest rate trajectory that the world is going to be faced with, and how you see some of these factors impacting markets globally, the investment sentiment globally as well. Where do you see interest rates headed? Do you believe that we're likely to see more cuts coming in? And what will be some of the other crucial risks that investors need to watch for?
Well, all those questions are for the short term, so let me answer some short-term questions. Look at the markets. The markets are honest. I mean, any single day the markets may miscalculate something, but over time, markets is a great mirror of what's really going on. So whether there's political pressure one way or the other, sure, that could shape a market over any one day or week, but markets actually are bigger than any individual or any economy. And so if the Federal Reserve eases too early, and we see inflation, we see measures that prove it wrong, you're going to have a steepening of the yield curve. So all those issues to me are not that important, to be honest. I know they're important for day traders. They're important for media because they can talk about all the churn and all that. But it really doesn't matter that much. And I don't really spend that much time focusing on those type of issues. Now, over a course of any one quarter, any 1 year, yeah, sure, they matter. But over time, the markets correct itself and rebalance itself. And that's pretty much the message that we have to constantly talk about. Because the message is not about the moment. And everybody gets so confused about the politics, the polarization of opinions, the politicization of everything. And yet, over time, that's the beauty of markets. The markets are an honest reflection of global economies over the long run. And if you believe in humanity, if you believe that we correct our problems over time, I actually believe the things you read in the newspaper, all the stuff we read that's frightening, I get actually excited because we're talking about those issues. And generally we mitigate most of the things that are on the front pages. We actually mitigate. So I actually am pleased when I see all the things, all these terrible things, and I'm not trying to say each and one of those things may be really terrible, but the fact that we're talking about it, it mitigates. We self-correct. Are the things that you don't read in the newspaper that you think are a problem, those are the things that bother me, like the long-term issues of deficits that we don't spend enough time talking about. How do we mitigate it? The best way we mitigate it is through growth. And that's what I try to tell every political leader. How do you grow your economy? Because if you grow your economy, the deficits will be smaller as a percent of GDP. But and so I don't get bothered by most of the stuff I read because it's a good thing. That's the power of the press to identify all the issues. But through that identification of the issues, we mitigate those issues. You think about all the problems you read and all the wars and all the skirmishes, but in most cases over time, they resolve themselves. You think about how problematic everything is when we entered this year, and yet when you think about the beginning of 2025, everybody was so nervous about everything, yet markets did great over 2025. We have some form of resolution in Gaza and Israel. There are so many other areas in the world where we actually have diminished risk. But if you ask the average person who reads a paper, they would think things are actually worse than they are. And to me, obviously, negative news sells far better than positive stories. And so what I'm trying to say, and my message to everybody is, yes, please be a global reader of what's going on, but don't get so alarmed by it because we're going to mitigate most of those problems because that's what we do as human beings. And that is the whole message about long-term optimism. Long-term optimists generally win. Elon Musk said in Davos, it's better to be an optimist and being wrong than being a pessimist who's right. And I think about just Elon himself for a second. I've never met a person who is as smart as he is, but with the imagination that he has and the guts to do what he's done. And I think in building that out, and I would just liken that to Mukesh Ambani, the ambition, the imagination. And those are the key things in growth and opportunity. And to me, this is what we all want to be a part of. We want to invest with the people who have ambition, who have the guts to do things that break the mold, that changes society, but they change society because of the imagination and guts. And to me, that's the beauty of being a long-term investor.
Absolutely. So being an optimist and getting it wrong versus a pessimist and getting it right, yep, in Elon Musk's words is more important, and you agree with him. But Mr. Ambani, you were talking about the startup ecosystem, and I want to understand from you, both of you spoke about changing the mindset from savings to investing, and both of you are focused on generating growth. What is the message to the young Indian saver today? What would both of you tell the young Indian saver? And let me start by asking you, Mr. Ambani.
Well, Shireen, I think that to my mind, the India opportunity, right, is genuinely a new era. It's now we can see it visibly over the next 2 or 3 decades in terms of, and all of us agree that growth, and we take growth for granted, but let me tell you, all over the world, people would die for 10% year-on-year growth, right? And we are growing on a large base, and we will sustain that. So for any young Indian, right, this growth is going to be converted to growth into his or her income, right? And so you would have income growth. We've got to continue our savings mindset. We still want to be conservative. We don't want to inherit too many deficit problems. We are still okay. So as long as we save, and if we make that mental mindset in terms of saying we will go and invest our savings to grow with India back into productive uses, to have these productive uses, Jio, BlackRock, and the whole financial community. Today, to my mind, like while we all talked about 1 minute, I still think that from my perception, right, access to investments and productive compoundable investments is complex, it's not affordable, and it's not available to all. And that is what every young Indian should demand for. And it's our job in industry to do exactly what we did with Jio, that it should be available to all. And then people will benefit from the power of compounding. I think that we talked about compounding, but money in a bank account lying in simple interest is not compounding. Money in stock market is compounding, and India has an efficient market. We have now regulated it well. And if we can channelize this money to grow for every Indian along with them, right? That is the opportunity that we have, where hundreds of millions of Indians, right, become owners of wealth and don't only observe wealth creation. And I think that India is well equipped. The institutional mechanism as well as the corporate mechanism is aligned with that very fact that we are here utilizing all the technologies to enable this for Indians is there. And within this framework, right, there are still many, many unsolved problems. And even after 3 decades, there'll be many unsolved problems. So the opportunity for startups, think in a big macro piece, right? It's a $110 trillion world, 4.5 trillion India, right? The $110 trillion world with AI productivity will go up to a $300 trillion world in 3 decades, right? India has the opportunity to take its share. So there is like 35 trillion. We have 30 trillion of new value, right? That has to be created. And that means there is 30 trillion of new market value. And that is what people will participate in the next 3 decades. And that's why even 100 Reliances might not be enough. But that's the opportunity for a young Indian starting today.
Larry Fink, your message to young Indians in the context of what you've seen happen in the other countries that you operate in?
Mostly believe in your own country. Believe in the opportunity growth. I mean, think about it. If India can grow 10% a year, then let's assume the stock market only grows at 10% a year. It grows at a multiple of the growth of a GDP. But let's assume it only, that means you're doubling your pool of money every 6.5 years. Okay, that's a pretty good outcome. That's much better than keeping your money in a bank account. And to me, that's the foundational issue. Grow with your country, and if you believe that that there's leverage in the system, which there is, if the economy grows at 10%, the equity markets are going to grow you know, you know, 5-6 points above that over time. And so to me, that is that's the foundational to build financial security, dignity when you're in retirement. And to me, that is a whole foundational issue for a successful economy.
You know, you spend a lot of your time fishing, Larry,
I do.
I believe. And, you know, I believe this deal got done in a car, and it was less
We
than...
weren't fishing, no.
No, you were not fishing, but what was the bait?
Friendship.
Friendship. That is the perfect note to end this conversation. Larry Fink, Mukesh Ambani, thank you so very much for joining us and giving us a long-term perspective of the strength of the India story and the strength of this partnership. Appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Larry Fink and Mukesh Ambani.
Thank you, Shivi. You're brilliant as usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
This is why you feel stuck in the same patterns even after trying everything. Reason number one, you are only treating symptoms. The first reason you feel stuck is that you are only addressing surface level problems. You try meditation, you read self help books, you set new goals, but none of these addresses what is actually causing the problem in your subconscious mind. Reason number two, the brain is wired for the familiar patterns. Your brain prefers familiar patterns, even painful ones, over unknown change. Your subconscious mind sees change as a